but flat headcount and how you can best operate in this 2026 reality. So, hello everyone. I am Matt Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op. RevOps Co-op is a global community of almost 19,000 folks from, as you can see, kind of all over the map based on a couple that we have in the audience today. If you are not a member, we have a lot of different membership options, including a free option. I'm going to drop some links to those in the chat as we go along. The other thing I want to mention is our annual conferences are back. So we are hosting RevOps AF this year in San Francisco in May. And we are also doing a EMEA event, which is going to be in London in June. And so for anyone out there who is interested in joining us, I'll drop some links in the chat as well for that, revopsaf.com. Tickets are on sale now. They are limited and we expect to sell out rather quickly. So snag it before they are gone. And yes, there will be an epic karaoke party at both of them, like we always do. Going to incorporate lots of fun along with lots of learning. But with that, I actually want to hand it over to my panelists that I have here today. So I have Mike Carpenter, who is the founder and executive chairman over at X Factor, and a couple of other members of his team, Ben and Jose. So Mike, why don't you go ahead and get us rolling on this topic today of the 2026 reality, and we can start walking through some slides and content that we have to share with folks.
All right, so I'll let Ben run the deck, but let me take you through what I faced as a recovering CRO. So I spent a large part of my career, I spent time just to give you a background on who I am. I started my own business when I was 19. I sold that business when I was 24, and then I spent 13 years at McAfee, eventually becoming the president of Americas. So I kind of built my way up through a bunch of different verticals in the business. From there, I went to a couple different startups, both very successful, and the final one at CrowdStrike, where I was the president of worldwide sales and operations. And one of the things that was always plaguing issue for CROs was the fact that you're expected to do more every year, just like a sales rep with the same territory. But yet that problem gets bigger when you're expected to do it every year with the same amount of people and the same costs. So how do I grow my revenue 25% as the target says with 0% headcount? But I was tasked with trying to figure out how to grow it 100% year over year with very limited increase in budget. The same thing that a sales rep sees when you start every year, no good deed goes unpunished, and you're looking at how do I perform like I did last year in the same accounts with a higher quarter. And so it's a problem we go through, and you could look at it as a disconnect in the business, or you have to find different ways to do it. What we do is we look at different X factors that could exist out there in the business, trying to dive into the details and find new ways to get there. The best way I like to explain it is, when I was growing up, I was looking at you play any type of digital game, whether it was back in those days, I'd age myself with calling it Sega and Nintendo and whatever it turns into be now. It's all virtual reality. It was like you'd hit the button up twice and the X button 3 times, and all of a sudden, you'd find the hack in the system. And
Or you'd
that's
have
what
to
we,
buy you remember those books you'd have to buy that had like those cheat codes in them, right?
yeah,
Where
yeah, yeah.
it was like, yeah, exactly. Like up, diagonal, A, B, X, Y, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I remember all that.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking for. And I did it for a living for, the entire time I was out there selling, trying to figure out what could I do differently. I wasn't going to be able to just work harder than everybody else and make a difference, right? How is that going to get there? And so we're looking for those 3-degree dial turns where we can, make the entire bathtub, the entire battleship take a 380-degree turn in the bathtub. So those are the cheat codes we're looking for in business. Like, how do you find that? What's the opportunity, and how do you get there? And you have to reset that over and over again. Next slide. One of the things that, Ben and I were talking about earlier is it's a constant, issue between, how do you pull in the right amount of leads? How do you drive the right amount of opportunity? And how do you execute and reduce that balancing act that exists within business day after day, week after week, every time you're trying to figure out how do we get to those targets and how do we meet those goals? Ben, why don't you talk a little bit about challenges as CMO to help kind of frame the issue?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So whenever you get some of these edicts down from on high, right, they kind of come with these challenges that we have to address. So, Mike, if you were to tell me, hey, I need more yield, I need more output, my typical response is, great, how much more budget do I have? But if we're facing that problem where it's like, look, we can't expand, right? We have to use the resources we have. And I feel like a lot of people are in that same boat. Me as a marketer, now I have to get super hyper focused on not volume, but quality, right? I need to know that these people have a problem that I can solve for them, right? And so when it comes to trying to balance this kind of these all these requests and in time, right? It becomes difficult to manage, right? And that's kind of the whole point of this. It's not just marketing, but like so I have complications that are going to impact things downstream. So as I look to tighten my things up, my counterparts in customer service, they're also going to have to deal with this. So I'm going to be pushing hopefully more qualified people, but they are also going to have a concern about, well, are these the right people? Because what happens if we sign people up, but they aren't the right people? They churn quickly, right? Then you're just pushing the problem down to the next quarter. So now I have to fill what I missed last quarter and do it again this quarter. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Great. Why don't we dive in to the product and give an overview of exactly how we're doing it? So let's turn over to Jose and let's
Okay.
take a deeper look at how that looks.
All right.
You're on mute, Jose, I think.
When you start using the X Factor product, and I'm assuming everybody can hear me, one of the first things that we try to address is trying to surface these insights, things that you may not know about that could help you, as Mike said, identify those X factors. So you can think about what you're looking at right now as those things that if you handle them, if you address them correctly, can give you, that additional edge. So what we're doing here is we're doing a deep dive into your business, into your data, and trying to figure out the things you did not know about your own business that may be plaguing you. Small little details that, if addressed, can make these humongous changes. The system is analyzing your own information. It allows you to dive into that information, understand the trends, understand the drivers, understand the recommendations for each of these things. So in this example, there's some opportunities that are underperforming. So it's diving into them, trying to give you some understanding of what's going on, and then allow you to dive into those situations. You can then start tracking them over time. So let's say that this is an important one that you want to handle. You can then mark this as in progress and start tracking that situation, so that you can identify what's wrong or what you want to improve on, and then start actioning it immediately, and then track what is happening over time. Um, Additionally, you can look at other parts of the business as well. So you can, if you want to dive into what is going on across your capacity, across your territories, across your demand generation, across your CS, you can do that as well. So it's the platform, the X Factor platform is trying to help surface challenges and then help you address them and monitor them in real time. Should we go back to the presentation?
Here, you let me share my desktop. All right. Going back to our original hypothesis about, well, what happens when you get a number that comes down and says, I have to grow this business. I can't add any headcount. And that was kind of the modus operandi, right? For the longest time, right? I knew it as hire to hit, right? So if you needed a revenue target, you would say, well, what's my capacity and what's my yield? So those were kind of the basic things that you're looking at. So if I can't alter what the total number of people here, I'm going to need to get a higher yield out of it. And if I'm going to ask that of my sales team, I'm going to look upstream to marketing first. And I'm going to say, listen, we need people that are ready. And this is where intent data becomes extremely valuable, right? So Mike, he always tells me like MQL is a vanity metric. He's like, don't report it to me. Tell me about the conversion. How many of those converted, right? Because that's what truly matters. It's just not how many people raise their hand. It's how many people raise their hand that you can actually progress, that you can make sure you're walking that journey with them. So when sales is flat, me as a marketer has to step in and say, okay, I can't send ghosts to sales teams to have them set up to not meet people, to have meet people that aren't the right fit. Each one has to become, each meeting, each qualified lead has to become X% more more effective, right? Because I can't rely on volume. I can't just say, well, I'll increase the budget and run more people through the funnel to get a higher yield simply because resource constraints. And like my salespeople, I have the same number. They can't automatically just handle 30 more additional meetings to hit the number that I need. So each one that I pass along has to be even more thoroughly vetted, and it has to make sure that those people are high intent with a high probability of progression through the pipeline. And then if you look at the sales impacts, right? So now typically, you have to alter one of these things, right? So sales rates, sales cycle, deal size, territory configuration. One of these things is going to have to move, right? And it's typically on the RevOps to be like, okay, which ones are we going to move and what are those impacts, right? So, but the issue is you start to see a lot of seams. When you start to pressure test your system, you start asking more of the same resources. Potentially people on the sales team that don't have necessarily a complete skill set, those are going to start to become more apparent, right? Everyone that doesn't do, the negotiations properly, that's going to become more apparent. So it's a difficult task just to say everyone's just going to have to kind of do more, do better, right? They need surgically to be tuned into exactly what they need to hit and that kind of takes us to the next thing, the operational impact. So it's not just can my sales do more? It's I also need to consider, if my volume and headcount are fixed, I have to now play with time. And time is all related to what do my internal processes look like? So I can't, as a marketer, find the best and most high intent leads to give to the sales, who then progress them at lightning speeds, only to be caught up in an internal process, only for a deal to land on at the deal desk or on a CFO's desk that sits there and collects dust, right? So RevOps mandate has to be ruthlessly calculating about what are all the processes that I need to manage, and are those going to be fast enough to make sure that we aren't paying the friction tax, right? This is one of those kind of things that are almost invisible in a dashboard, but something that, people that sitting in the seat of RevOps have to consider. And this one I find probably the most interesting, and I think it's because I spent a long career when situations like this happen. Kind of the knee-jerk response is, okay, well, all my I'm going to peanut butter spread, right? I'm going to give this quota, I'm going to give it, everyone just gets the same amount, everyone has to raise
Ben, the big question that comes out is it the issue with my territory or is it the issue with my quota?
Yeah.
So getting this right, it's your responsibility as well to the sales organization. As a leader, when you're setting this up, it was something that always drove me crazy. Trying to look at figuring out that everybody had the equal opportunity, that when I set a quota, it wasn't everybody just gets $1 million. And that's the issue. And it's one way that leaders try to solve the issue, but it's not the right way to do it. I mean, you have to really look at the total addressable market. You have to look at how is the partnership between sales and marketing? Did Ben get this territory ready for me to hire somebody? Did my executive team fund it properly so that we could put the right people in the role and have a chance of them being successful? And I think you and I have challenged that through our careers, looking at, when is a territory ready and whose job is it to get it ready, right? How important have you seen that when you're looking at a company to scale? How important is it for you to be ready for them to make that hire? Like, you've put in the effort, you've put in the time, you have the qualified leads. Now your job has been done where they can actually do the execution. I mean, where have you seen that in your career be successful?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not providing air cover, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, right? Like if I'm not supporting my sales guy, he's going to be the first one to let me know, right? That's going to be my early warning. But eventually, it's going to be like, listen, I'm fighting uphill battles here because you aren't providing what I call air cover, which is marketing support, driving awareness, driving high value, interactions with the people that sales eventually will hopefully be having these conversations with, right? Failure on my job makes their job 10 times as harder. Like, and we've been talking about, right? We can't pay friction tax, we can't pay time tax, right? And we can't just peanut butter spread and hope someone else will pick up the slack. So that's why having a surgical approach to, okay, before I put someone in this territory, have I warmed it up? Is marketing doing their job, making sure that when my salespeople do reach out, they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about you. Yeah, I'm interested in what you guys are doing."
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I used to enforce my team to do when we go through the planning process and they'd want to make a hire, I'd make them triple cut that patch before they can make the hire, so that we had the ability to have a Ben go in and surgically market to those accounts and get them ready. So the next time that pressure came down to grow the business, that territory was ready. That person I pulled from another job that was going to start to work for our business, take that leap of faith, was coming to a place that they could actually be successful. So believe it or not, I think this is not just an obligation to yourself, but for the people you're hiring and for the business to get this right. And it's one of the hardest things in the world to do because, one of the biggest issues is how do I split the territory, right? Not just how do I set the quota for it, like how do I carve it out? Nobody wants to give up their next set of accounts. It's really difficult to figure out what the opportunity looks like, and it's really hard to make a new rep perform. If you ask anybody that's been a CRO or a sales leader over time, what their average ramp time is for productivity of a rep, you know what they say?
Hmm.
6 months. It's the same
Yeah.
answer from everybody. And the reason is because they don't know. It,
I
like,
was, I was just gonna say, yeah, like everyone, like no one actually knows the real answer to that question because everyone just takes a guess or they think they're like, oh, I assume it's 6 months, right? But no one actually knows. And I'm sure you're gonna probably talk about this next, Mike. It's one thing when you have maybe like one, two, five, 10 sales reps, right? Once you start having hundreds, thousands, and you're bringing on
just
new people, like
it escalates.
not knowing that answer and having that wrong can cost you millions of dollars, right? Like it's a big deal. And people, I don't know why, like just some people are just fine assuming they know the answer when they actually don't. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I get, I was guilty of it. I mean, I gave the same answer. I'd sit in a board meeting and they'd be like, what's your time to productivity for a rep? And what's your average yield? And the interesting thing was the question that always came to me was how many reps meet their number? And it was embarrassingly low all the time, right? Like I feel like 55% is a good number. And why is that reason? It's because the ripple effect number 4 is broken. Like we're not setting up territories the right way. We're not taking the time for onboarding to get it done the right way. We're not pre-thinking through this. And when best in class looks like 55% of the reps hit their number, that's a problem. Because what that tells me is that 45% of the people there aren't able to pay their bills because you didn't put them in a position as a leader where they could be successful. It can't be that you hired half the people you hired were wrong hires, right? So that's why this, like, we started this business because this is a major, major issue and it hasn't been solved yet.
Well said. And I mentioned this one earlier, but this one I think often goes kind of right by people without even thinking, right? The CS ripple. So now we've talked about sales, marketing, operations, splitting up territories. People that fail to consider, okay, well, what happens if I somehow I push enough people, I pull in enough deals, and I barely get these people across the line, probably faster than my normal sales cycle. And here's where it hits CS. If these people aren't the exact right fit, if they're not your ideal customer and they're having adoption problems and they're not right for the product, you're going to see people start to churn. Churn is like a bomb that's waiting to go off, right? So you've worked all this hard, you've made your quarter number. Then the next quarter, you have all this churn because you had to kind of make some sacrifices last time. Well, now the CS people are dealing with it. They're having churn fallout. And so now what happens is the business is going to come back and ask the team to say, well, okay, we hit it last year, but now we need to kind of not only hit this quarter, but then that deficit again, right? So it's basically
But where do you see that break?
plus.
Where do you see that breakdown, Ben? This whole, you don't expect to churn a client when you sell them. So to double click on that to help people understand a little bit, where do you see that customer support or customer success ripple breakdown?
Yeah. So I think in my career, and I've conferred with a bunch of other people that I respect, I have a hypothesis that the best churn predictor happens during the customer's onboarding, right? So the customers, we've sold them, they've agreed, they've signed all the paperwork, and they're ready to turn on the program, right? It's right there where the rubber hits the road. Are all those promises going to come true? Is this going to actually solve the problem that I have? And here's where it's critical because as a marketer, I promised them, look, you talk to us, we'll solve your problem. The sales guy said the same thing. And now if they weren't exactly right, if it's too enterprise, not an enterprise enough, if it doesn't address the problem that they need during that onboarding, it's just not sticking. That's the biggest indicator that churn's going to happen.
Yeah, what I love that you called it ripple is because I look at this is it is a ripple effect. It started when they started selling to them. When you start to set up the selling process, you have to and those expectations have to be managed, not just on the fact that the features that you're selling are working. You literally have to have that discussion of value. How does my product change the way that you do things? How does it make you more successful in your job, in your role? Right? Like, and that needs to be followed through the entire selling process from the way that you design a territory, to the way you onboard a client, to the way that your customer operates and uses your product. And that's why I love the way that you coin these ripple effects because they don't just happen at one given point in time. And so maybe I asked the question so I could tee myself up for a really good answer. But I do think that it is a ripple effect along the way. Like if you set that up from the time that you had first discussion to the time that they wrote you a check to the time that like they installed it the first time, and those expectations kept being circled back to what is the value? What did they do to actually, why did they buy a product? Why did they take my first conversation? Why did they take my third? Why did they like choose to open my email that I sent 2 weeks ago? Like you have to keep tying that back to value. And that value has to start early if you want to stop the churn effect. And it needs to be followed through the entire lifetime that they work with you. Because you know what? Wherever you go, they're going to buy from you again.
Absolutely. show someone value and demonstrate you can solve their problem, like, they'll let you watch their kids.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to tee that up because I love the whole ripple effect, and I knew the answer that I asked the question too early. So I apologize, Ben. You were
No apologies, right? This is about information sharing.
Also, Ben, are you offering, is that an offer to watch my kids? Because I will totally take you up on that.
Hey, my man, I have 6 kids, so I'm sure one of my older ones will take it.
Yeah,
I
there
just
you
don't
go.
know if they'll go down from Manhattan Beach, where it's 80 every day, to where it's below
To
50.
negative 50. Yeah.
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 It's my side hustle is just babysitting on the side.
All right.
I won't spend a ton of time on this, but another factor, it's not a ripple, but it's just a reality that kind of everyone deals with is you have all this
Hey, Ben,
fragmented.
can I pause you for 1 second?
Please.
Since Jose only wanted to do 5 minutes of showing the product, I think he's got a little extra time to watch his kids, so we can help him help out too. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Sorry. I couldn't resist.
Oh, there's always time for humor. I think this is something it's pretty universally related. If you're a marketer, you see everyone kind of talking about this information in silos, and I think nowhere is it more true than when we take a look at it from a RevOps perspective, right? So you have data in these systems. They may not talk to each other, and it has to go through this pattern, right? It has to go from the system to a spreadsheet to a slide to somebody's brain, and then the reverse process when they give feedback or any change is needed, right? It's once you take that information out of the system, it's now stale, and now you have to kind of transform it and discuss it and kind of poke at it, but it's not really necessarily addressing that these are blind spots, and you can't even really tell how they're going to interact, right? You have to kind of bubble it up, right? It's a summary of what's going on, and so the result is you can't really spot these problems before they materialize. You kind of have to feel the pain before you start to look and say, okay, well, where did this go wrong? Where was the breakdown? Which system was it?
Yeah, it's Ben. Let's hit that. I think that's like another good one to double click on. Do you know what the biggest issue between a CRO and the CMO was? In my opinion, it was the fact that they were never working off of the same data.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to add things up, and there's a lot of different sources you can get and interpretations you can get off of the same data set. When those are built off of spreadsheets, that's the problem right there. I mean, we would literally spend months, 3, 4 months in a row at my peak, 50 to 60 people working in the spreadsheet. These files would become massive. And one bad what if command, and all the data is wrong. All the planning's wrong. All the assumptions are wrong. And now people's jobs are at risk, and a product that could change the world never made it to light. And so I just want people to think about how big that problem is, because I'm telling you, it was everywhere. I like the different versions. What naming convention did I put in place to make sure everybody was working off a version that I fixed an error in already? Like, these things were set up and literally could break down thousands of people having a job and not being able to be successful because of it. So it's a massive blind spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can't think back to how many times I've labeled something final and then final and final as all these changes kind of roll in, which is a big part of, like, again, part of the reason we're stuck. We just talked about spreadsheets, right? Like it's keeping us at having to pull it out of the system and put it into something where it automatically goes stale. It's fraught with, user input is delicate, and I don't know how many, people that are trying to learn Excel. It's like one flip of a sign, and like Mike said, that ripples through the entire model. And RevOps spends weeks building these models to get an answer, and they could be surprised if it doesn't go. The other reason, it's backwards looking, right? So we're looking in the past at the data that we pulled, and this is what happened. It has nothing to do with what is going to happen. That's a complete blind spot. This is just a record of what has transpired, like the math that kind of arrived at our doorstep. And I think
I think Jose put it best for me when he was presenting probably 2 years ago now, Jose, but I'll bring it back to show you how good my memory is. You said, you know who our biggest competitor is? A 43-year-old technology called Excel. And you couldn't have been more right. Nothing exists. Like we're telling you problems, but that's what our product solves for. And right now, the backbone of this issue is the fact that we're still selling the same way that we're managing a business off of Excel spreadsheets. And it needs to change. It needs to evolve. And I do think it is the biggest backbone of where tech is stuck. It's stuck on a 40-plus-year-old technology.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's not, I think this contributes to kind of the trap that a lot of people find themselves in. So we're relying on this old technology. The tools that we were given to do the job 40 years ago haven't necessarily progressed as much as they need to, but those are the ones we've had. We built processes around those systems, right? We built processes on how to pull data out of disparate systems to then work on it and build a model and then refine it. That act is part of what's keeping us in the dark, right? It's forcing us to look backwards. It's forcing us to keep these silos because, well, that's the process. I grab one thing from here and one thing from here, and I'm assuming this is all going to match, that everyone's math, Mike, like you said, that everyone does math the same way. But that's not true, right? These backwards looking thing also are going to blind you from any signals that might be screaming like, hey, there's a bit of an issue here, right? It's not going to see the ripples for you. Right. So then we have to default to, all right, let's dig in, bring the team. We got to find this issue. We missed a number. Let's dive in. But then we start the process over again. Right. We pull the data from the disparate systems. We look backwards and we're just doing the same thing to try to get ahead. And it's just keeping us trapped in this loop. So that brings us to what can we do about it? Right. So how do we calculate the ripple effect, right? From one department to the next? How do you manage all that math, all that calculation? Is that even possible? So I think the tools that we have, even the most advanced ones up to the past couple of years, at best were predictive and they tell you, well, based on everything that has occurred in the past, this might happen. But I also think that's kind of looking at it with a blind eye because you're holding every variable constant, right? You're just saying, okay, I'm just going to push time with this one tiny factor here. Nothing else is considered, no other changes, nothing else kind of comes out in that wash. So
I love the word causal, right? Because when we talked about when we started this off, it was cause and effect. I hit the button up 3 times, hit X twice, move
yeah,
over by the cheat code that our friendly host was. I need that link still. I never actually found out where I could buy it. I always try to figure it out. But look at causal AI is a word I love because trying to figure out the cause and effect of things is exactly what can make that difference.
yeah, absolutely.
And for some people that may not know the difference, right? Predictive AI, it's like saying there's firemen when there's fires, therefore the firemen must cause the fires. The fact that the data is there, that the two pieces of data are there, doesn't mean that one thing costs the other. But sometimes when looking at GTM things, we may make that correlation incorrectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different layers to it. And back to the bigger problem, Jose, is Excel. Like
Yeah.
you have one thing wrong. What is it called when you keep duplicating the spreadsheet and then putting more changes on it? I forget what they call that, but you're basically taking the algorithm or the what if command that you created in Excel. You duplicate that Excel spreadsheet, create a new version, make more changes, and that gets buried deeper and deeper, and more analytics are being set to tell you cause and effect. Where based on how we do it, you want to explain how AI makes that different for us? And
Absolutely.
I know
And I
you
think
love the
that,
math behind this, so I'm kind of
yeah,
teeing you up.
yeah, and I think that was the next slide. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on that, just so that the audience can understand what we're thinking and how we're thinking about it. So earlier we discussed what with flat headcount, how do you address growth, right? So in this example, looking at a capacity plan where in this example we have a $6 million bogey, but your current capacity only allows you for 4 million. You need to hire a ton of people if you're going to hit that number. And even if you did hire them, you have to consider things like ramp time that are not going to help you, right? I mean, you can if you can hire you hire them now, but you're not going to be able to make any significant progress. So, what are other levers that I can move, and what's the cost and effect of those levers? Not only is there an effect, but what's the quantitative effect, right? So I have an example here where, we asked, well, if I have a hiring freeze, I cannot move that, and I want to retain my top talent. Show me how quota and attrition are related, and what happens if attrition starts spiking due to bad territory balancing. We talked a little bit about this earlier. So it's I think it's important to understand what's called a causal chain. So causal change is the cause effect in relationships. So quota affects attrition. Attrition affects capacity, affects growth rate. So those things are intertwined. But then the next question is, well, okay, I know they're connected, but what's the actual mathematical calculation of what could happen? So the system does all the math behind the scenes for you that tells you, okay, if I were to lose some people, here's the economic shortfall of losing those people. And then, of course, makes recommendations of what to do, like if you stay as is versus if you make some improvements and retain. So there's deep learning models behind the scenes that are looking at your data and creating predictive results based on these causal chains that you're seeing here. And like Mike said, there's a ton of these. And it's very difficult for a person to visualize all of them because we've identified over 80 causal chains. Oh, sorry, causal nodes. So they're all intertwined one way or the other. So understanding what would happen, what would the ripple effect of changing one thing here is to another thing. It's a very difficult thing for a human brain to get around. But understanding it from having the system do this analysis for you and give you
You're looking at like literally millions of statistical variations that could happen
correct.
based on every variable that moves in this specific impact of causal effect, of causal chain.
Exactly.
So, I mean, for everybody that's listening, if you think about all of the different variables that could be in any of these categories, they would completely change the outcome of the recommendation. And that's why you need AI to be able to analyze. This is like the massive promise of what AI can do is it can pick up a pattern of massive equation that our brains couldn't compute. And there's not even the processing power of Excel to be able to compute that. So, having this capability of causal AI is literally game changing for what you could do for business. It's not replacing the fact that you have to actually do the work. You have to think about the problem. It's literally replacing the pattern recognition, which is just that mere processing power that we don't possess, that we couldn't possess as a human operator. And this is like the true definition of what Copilot is.
Absolutely. And we also talked about attrition, right? And even asking the question, what is the attrition of your reps? If the answer is a single number, that by itself is incorrect because you will have different attrition rates across your organization. You're going to have team members that are enterprise reps have a different attrition rate than SMB reps or reps that pursue a specific industry. So understanding or being able to visualize both ramp time and attrition across different dimensions is important. So here you have some examples of what the potential ramp time is for different roles across an organization. So it varies. And it's important to also understand because this is statistical calculation. What's the error rate, right? So the error rate for the overall number versus the error rate for the individual values. But more importantly, going back to the whole causal piece, so in this example, right, where we have a business that cannot hire more, what are the options, right? So, there are a number of things you could do, right? As the other example was showing, potentially what could happen if you could reduce your attrition. So in this example, maybe I can reduce, I have apparently significant attrition in the Americas. So what if I could reduce that attrition and control it a little bit more, right? If I can tweak it down from like 76% to 50%, well, what's the impact to my capacity? I can model that. I can model other variables, your ramp time, or I can model my average sales price. What if, right? So not only does the system give you recommendations, as you saw here, but you could all model other causal chains, and in essence, get that copilot to give you some recommendations, and then you can just validate those and tweak them to your liking. And just like this, I mean, there's a ton of other examples across things that you can do with flat headcount, right? So, what if you improve your processes? And could I reduce sales cycle? Like so, have the sales cycle, and then what's the impact of that to my velocity and my future net new ARR? So again, all different types of causal chains that we can model and calculate, right? So it's in this example, it's looking at your current sales cycle, determining, okay, I want to reduce it. So what are the things that I can do? So it's doing a downstream analysis of all of these causal chains to then determine, okay, what are your options and how can you get there? So you can see here is like it's doing a cascading calculation where it's trying to figure out, okay, so if I improve my tooling, then I can improve my selling time. Which will have further downstream effects all the way down to my ARR. Again, something very difficult to do, both on a spreadsheet is almost impossible, and especially the mathematical calculations. Um, and again, there's so many permutations that it's difficult for a single person to be able to get all of these right by hand.
Great. Do we want to open it up? Are there any questions that may come for us? I think this is a wrap for us.
Didn't have any audience related questions. I had one question for you guys though, as we kind of wrap up. So as you were going through this, showing us the product, talking about some of these examples, and I think Ben, it was when you were walking through everything, it was just like, man, like this is just a hard job, right? It's like you were like, hey, you got to consider time, you got to consider downstream ripple effects. Jose was just showing something. It's like there's 4 different things you could do to potentially have an impact on this. But then obviously, like those 4 things coupled with time, coupled with the people you have, also creates all this other stuff, right? So it's just like there are all these things, and it can feel overwhelming. And so for the operators that are out there, if you were to look at 2026, the fact that we're in January right now, do you have like a top priority or like a top 3 list of like, hey, regardless of your business, the complexities, the unique things that you have, like here's the 1, 2, or maybe 3 things to look at, to focus on after this call wraps up today that could have a big impact on whether or not you hit your 2026 numbers. Maybe something that's commonly overlooked or hiding in plain sight. Like you guys have worked with a lot of RevOps teams. You obviously have tons of marketing, sales, and product experience. Like anything come to mind that you'd want to just offer up as advice? Like again, 1 to 3 things to kind of look at or focus on for this year so folks can actually hit their targets.
Yeah. Why don't we split it since we have 3, we'll have equal airtime here. Each one of us can give one. I think the biggest thing right now is a reliance. You have to move away from feature selling. Everybody right now is, when you look out there across most spaces, you have hundreds of competitors. And because of the way communication and social media and marketing has evolved, they're all saying the same exact things. And they're just research and copying each other. You need to separate your solution with value. And you need to find a platform to be able to distill what that value is and deliver it to your clients with like a closed loop cycle. I think it's probably the most important thing that I could think of But there's also big issues. I know on the top of Jose's mind, I don't want to take your time, Jose, but I know territory design is a huge issue that we're working on solving. So maybe that's an area for you. But I'll let you talk for yourself.
Yeah. So I've seen so many companies get territories wrong because they're using a very generic approach where they're not really considering the dynamics of the different markets. Let's start with the fact that many companies don't even consider their ICP comprehensively. They don't understand what are all the companies that they can target, and therefore, if they don't know how big of a market their sales reps can pursue, how are they going to be able to quantify a good quota? And then sellers are incentivized by closing deals. So if they don't have a lot of opportunities to sell towards, they're not going to be excited to do anything, and that'll drives attrition, right? So getting that right, being able to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each rep, and making sure that you have a patch that is the right size for that rep for their quota is critical. So doing that correctly, in an algorithmic way, not in a I'm gonna guess approach, which is what most people do. I think it's going to go a long way and allow you to grow way faster than you're thinking.
So I think for me, it's not always a guess, but my top tier recommendation is question some assumptions that you typically don't. So, and I'll give you an example. So we were working with a customer. He hooked into our system. It ran an analysis really fast, and it came back and it said, you have $5 million trapped behind this salesperson, right? They're not moving fast enough. You have all these opportunities sitting there. And the guy looks across the desk at us and he goes, well, that's my top sales guy. And we're like, uh-huh. He'd never even thought to, well, should I question this person? He's my top producer, but he also had the most leads, right? He like we're talking about equitable territories, but now like he's sitting on potential money that other people could have helped him close, but no one thought to question it because he's the guy that produces the most.
Yeah,
So
it's a great topic. It's feed the eagle. It ends up trapping a lot of money when you're not setting up those equitable territories, and you're so afraid of losing your top salespeople that you trap a lot of opportunities sometimes behind them versus giving your organization a chance to scale.
Yeah. I like that. And actually, Ben, as before you mentioned that, I was gonna kind of wrap up with maybe like that, like challenging the people that are here with just that. Like maybe the one thing that we all can do, again, right? New year, new you. We're early on in 2026. We're still in January. Maybe take a look at the way that your company is doing business, and maybe take a look at some of those, I don't know, long held beliefs or those things that people have just been taking for granted, maybe not really looking at. Jose gave the example territories, right? Like, has anyone actually looked at the way that you're dishing out territories and said, like, does this make sense, right? Like, or is it just one of those things where it's like, well, same as last year, roll it forward. Same thing with quotas, compensation, the top sales rep example, right? Like, maybe take a look at some of those things that you've just taken for granted and have kind of just rolled forward, and ask some questions. Ask why a couple of times. Dive into the actual data, try to pick just one, and see where it takes you. Because my guess is that you're probably going to find a lot of opportunity if you actually do that. Don't look at all of them, right? You'll get overwhelmed. Pick one though and start there. Well, guys, this was great. I really appreciate you dropping some knowledge on the attendees today. I appreciate you giving us kind of the quick tour of the highlight of the product as well. This was great. But that's all I got for you. So Ben, Mike, Jose, thank you guys very much for joining. To all the audience members and attendees out there, thank you for joining us as well. But with that, I will let you all run. So have a good rest of your Thursday and a good rest of your week and weekend. We'll see you at the next one, everybody. Thank you. Take it easy.